This Week in Startups is brought to you by OurCrowd helps you invest early in pre-IPO companies alongside professional VCs. If you're interested in investing, you can join OurCrowd for free at OurCrowd.com/twist. Roman. Erectile dysfunction used to be tough to talk about, but now there's Roman. Go to GetRoman.com/twist and get $15 off your first order of ED treatment, a free online visit, and free 2-day shipping. And Squarespace. Turn your idea into a new website. Go to squarespace.com/twist for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use offer code TWIST to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, and today on the program, an artist who made incredible videos and worked with Saturday Night Live, pivoted his company from being a service company into being an enterprise company, and that company is Frame.io. You've probably heard of them, and the CEO and co-founder is Emery Wells. Welcome to the program, Emery Wells. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm great. It's great to be here.
How are you holding up under COVID? In New York City, my hometown, you guys had a rough go of it early on, and then things opened up and then things closed up again, huh?
You know, I feel kind of guilty saying it, but totally fine because I'm introverted and I'm one of the people that's in the camp of, I quite enjoy working from home and I feel very productive and I'm doing well and our company's doing well. So we're very fortunate that, we, in this environment, we have a tool that enables distributed work. So, that's certainly we've seen the tailwinds of that.
Yeah, that is a common theme I've heard among my friends. The extroverts like myself are losing their minds. And this is just torture and solitary confinement in their minds, even though it's not close to that, but it's in the same wheelhouse, but not exactly as brutal. And then for introverts, it's like, oh, this is great. We don't have to do meetings. So
That's
tell
right.
everybody in the audience what Frame.io is and how you came up with the idea.
Sure. So Frame.io is a video review and collaboration product, and we essentially have a tool that enables video teams to do their work. So prior to Frame.io, I had a post-production company in New York City. As you mentioned, we used to do things like the Saturday Night Live digital shorts and commercial parodies. So I spent, almost 15 years doing professional post-production filmmaking type stuff. And we started building Frame.io as an internal tool at that company, really just to solve the problems that we were having working with our clients, with our vendors, internally with one another. And when you think about, for those that maybe are not as close to the process of creating video, when you think about creating video, like any business process, and especially the more professional something gets, just the more complex everything gets, the more people are involved, the more companies are involved. And so when you're working on video, well, you obviously have first and foremost, let me set the record straight. I think sometimes people see Frame.io and they think it's a video editing tool, like a collaborative video editing tool, like a Figma for video. And that's not what we are. We solve, kind of the media sharing and the review and communication and kind of approval processes and things like that. But it starts with, well, you have different people working on stuff. You need to share big files. Maybe there's an editor that's in one location. There's someone doing motion graphics. There's a client in another location. So Frame.io first and foremost kind of hosts all the video files that you're working with, and it acts as a central repository. And then all of the communication and review happens on Frame.io. So when you think about, getting a video, if I sent you a video, Jason, if you were doing something, I'm sure you've made some videos and done some marketing. And if I sent you a video for one of your businesses, you'd immediately have a million thoughts, right? You're looking at it, say it's a unlisted YouTube link or something. I don't know. Yeah. You'd immediately have a million thoughts. And you'd sit down and you want to tell me, because say I'm the editor, you want to tell me all these thoughts and you're like, all right, let's see. I'm going to sit down at the email and say, okay, how am I going to construct these thoughts? Well, in the beginning or in the middle, or there's that part where the thing, when I said this or someone said that I want to change or cut out. Video has a time dimension. And it's actually very challenging to communicate around an asset that is moving. And so we have things like timestamped comments. So you comment directly on a video frame. You can, select a range and say, well, from here to here, let's cut this thing out. So that's the that's the gist of what we facilitate. Then we also integrate with all the creative tools. So when you leave a comment, so if I was the video editor and you left me a comment and said, hey, I don't like this shot. Well, actually what happens for me is that comment shows up in my video editing tool. So if I'm using Premiere or Final Cut or DaVinci Resolve, it actually shows up on the clip in my video editing tool. And I just say, oh, immediately I can just swap it out and then kick off another version. So in some ways you could kind of think of Frame.io like, sort of like a GitHub where we act as the central repository, but the actual work is happening elsewhere. It's happening, like in with developers, they have a code editing tool and then they push to GitHub, which is the central repository. So that's similar dynamic with Frame.io. There's video editors, there's motion graphics artists, there's people that are doing all this work. They push to Frame.io, and then that's where people can look at it, can collaborate, can say yay or nay. I like this, I don't like that. And then we go through this iterative process.
And so in that way, it's almost like you can think of two components there. One is the Dropbox kind of media management component.
Yeah.
And then there's the piece which is more like the InVision and the notes and the approval and workflow process.
That's right. Yep. That's perfect merge of tools that is Frame.io.
And is that used to occur or occurred best, at least from my, outside of the industry, but know people who've made movies and TV shows and stuff like that, and having visited them in an editing suite somewhere down in Tribeca, Manhattan, and you would go into a room and there'd be a big Avid, and basically people just sat over the editor's shoulders and gave them notes.
That's right.
Gave them notes in that sort of model.
That's right.
That still occurs? Is that considered the best practice, or do people prefer doing it in this distributed fashion? And what have you learned about which works better? Like, can you make, I don't know, There Will Be Blood, in this kind of format? Or do you need to be in the room with the people,
Yeah, so that's exactly how it's always historically worked, which is you sit in the room, you're over each other's shoulders, and that's how it's been forever. In fact, that was really the only way you could possibly do it, because you needed expensive equipment, you needed the footage, which the footage was on a big hard drive. It was all very tied to the physical location. That started to evolved over the past, I would say, basically as the internet got a little bit faster and online cloud storage got a little bit cheaper, people started naturally, moving some of this processes to like cloud-based tools, but they didn't have purpose-built tools. So they would use like stuff that wasn't meant for video. They'd use Dropbox. They'd use Hightail links. They would use, whatever, Hightail, you send it, Dropbox, all this sort of amalgamation of stuff just to kind of try to do it. In fact, it was very common actually to use in the early days, like just unlisted YouTube links or private Vimeo links or things like that. So anyway, historically it's worked that way, but absolutely. I mean, now with tools like Frame.io, people are shifting to this distributed way of working. And I think what COVID has proved is that, we were already moving in this direction. It was already happening. This was already the trend, but COVID, of course, was a catalyst for people having to adopt this. And guess what? Like, everything's still coming out on Netflix, right? Like everything's still happening. And so I think that it was, for us, this was, from a business perspective, it was good. From a world perspective, of course, it's terrible. But it proved that people did think there were a big group of people that thought, well, for like a certain class of work, you couldn't do it in this distributed way. You had to sit next to each other. And that's proven to be not true. I think like many have experienced with COVID, there are pros and cons to working in an async distributed way. Sometimes, there are benefits to working live and there are cons to working live. There are benefits to working async distributed and there are cons to working async distributed. So I
that's
think
really interesting, your point though, about prior to everybody being forced to work from home, everybody being forced to be distributed, there were people who believed there was a cap on what type of project could be done asynchronously. A fancy way of saying, like, you do a little bit of work and I'll get to it later. Asynchronous, like being email, right? You can just, you can do your work, send me the emails, they sit there, and then I respond to them on my schedule when I want to. Then you respond, right? But am I correct that the entire industry, making something like Mandalorian or making something like, I don't know, Queen's Gambit, all that stuff had to be done distributed. People couldn't be in the same video editing bay.
That's right.
And so what level of shows, if we were to, as the audience here to imagine, what's the highest level of show that would use something like your product?
So up to the highest level. So we have a pretty wide range of customers, all from the individual creator that are doing kind of like high-end YouTube videos, all the way up to Hollywood studios. So we've had shows from every Hollywood studio on Frame.io. A big part of our effort over the kind of maturing of our company has been being able to have the security controls and accreditations to work with those studios, and we've accomplished that over the past couple of years. So we have major Hollywood feature films that have won Oscars, big television shows. All of it goes through Frame.io.
And the key issue is the internet. Just people always think the internet was fast since whatever, they got their cable modem in 2000 or whatever. But actually a cable modem in 10, 20, 30 megabit, that's not actually enough to do this high-end video editing, right? Like, what do you actually need as a spec for people to reasonably work from home on these videos? Or is it enough?
Yeah, it depends on your workflow. So it depends on what portion of the workflow you're responsible for. But first of all, all the shows you mentioned, they're all being done from home now. So there is none of those companies are working in the ways that they did. They're all being done from home. We've done a lot of interesting case studies of how they shifted to those work from home environments. But for the basics of using Frame.io as a review and approval tool, you actually don't really need a lot of bandwidth. You need like 20 megabits. You'll get by with 20 megabits. If you want to do an entire workflow where everyone's distributed and you're moving like large original camera assets, I don't know. The more the better, right? Because let me give you some specs. The typical camera, like for any I'll just say the average amount of footage that's generated from an average amount of shoot, an average shoot is going to be probably 1 terabyte per camera per day. It could range. It could be 500 gigs. It could be so it's a lot, right? I'd say that if you have a gigabit connection, you can meaningfully move that data around. And one of the other big things that we focus on is large data transfer, because we have to deal with that. So moving large amounts of data over the internet, actually pretty hard. Browsers are pretty crummy at doing file transfer in an accelerated fashion. There's actually a whole sub-industry, kind of more niche industry, but a whole sub-industry that focuses on moving on large data transfer around the internet. They focus on industries like media and entertainment, oil and gas, like all kinds of companies that have large data sets.
And they do that through like some special backends and servers that are distributed, I guess. Tell me how they solve that problem, the last mile problem in the terabyte per camera per day when we get back on This Week in Startups. Do you ever wish that you invested early in some of the best performing IPOs of 2019 and 2020? I bet you did. Well, OurCrowd investors were able to invest in many of those IPOs because OurCrowd allows accredited investors to invest directly in these startups. And they can do it easily and they can do it early. And that's what it's all about. And these companies go on and sometimes they IPO and other times they get bought. OurCrowd investors benefited from investing early in companies like Beyond Meat that IPO'd. Amazing, right? That's a great exit strategy. Another one is many of OurCrowd's companies have been bought by really high-end acquirers like Intel, Nike, Microsoft, and Oracle. OurCrowd's professional research team identifies these promising companies and promising funds across a range of sectors. And they do it across a range of stages and many different locations. And OurCrowd is investing in medical technology, ag tech, food production, the multi-billion-dollar robotic industry, and so much more. So here is a very easy call to action for you. You go to ourcrowd.com/twist, OurCrowd.com/twist. You go to ourcrowd.com/twist, and then you can start investing. OurCrowd is free to sign up for, and you just go to OurCrowd.com/twist. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. All right, we are here with Emery Wells. He is the CEO and co-founder of Frame.io, based in my hometown, New York. Previously, he ran a very successful boutique video agency that did SNL's digital shorts. That's pretty cool. Did you do Lazy Sunday? Was that one of the first ones you did, or?
I started working with that team just after towards the tail end of Andy Samberg's time there. So I did work on not the original.
Natalie Portman?
No, not Natalie Portman. Not so, but I was gonna say not the original. So Dick in a Box was the other, big.
Yes, that was the other breakout.
All right. So there was a 3-part series. So Dick in a Box was before my time, but then there was 2 others that came after that, which was called I think it was called like Not Gay and it's called Not Gay in a 3-Way and something else. So I did the 2 episodes that came after Dick in a Box, and then for 4 seasons straight, basically all the pre-recorded, everything from trailers to the commercials to music videos, all of those.
Yeah, and so tell us about...
We did post-production.
Tell us about how the internet, how video editing and studios are making this work. Like, I remember back in the day, I knew somebody was working with James Cameron on, I guess, Avatar. And James Cameron had some kind of crazy fiber brought to his house or whatever they were telling me. Like, and they did all these crazy backhoe things, and they spent $1 million on fiber lines or something to make it work. And
That's right. So there's basically 2 approaches these days. So I probably know the company that James Cameron worked with to get that fiber line installed. There's a company that basically has a private fiber network that runs between all the major studios and anyone that has money to get a private fiber to their location. And so it enables the studios around the world to work with one another, and they're moving, terabytes and terabytes of data. It's very expensive, as you can imagine. It's dark, they license dark fiber, they build their own private fiber network. That's one model. The other model, which is what we use and what some other companies in the space use, is basically still using the backbone of the internet, the standard backbone of the internet. But there's a lot of things you can do to do large data transfer. There's infrastructure side. There is, there's an infrastructure side. There's a software side, and maybe just to give you the broad strokes of it. When you're moving data, you start on, say my machine here, I have a hard drive, a lot of data. I got to get it to a location, right? So the first barrier is, well, what is my interface to even communicate with the internet? Am I using a browser? Browsers have HTTP. That's a pretty crummy way to move large amounts of data because it's slow. You can use other protocols like UDP, but then, you're going to typically go to like a desktop-based client because you're not going to have that support in a browser. So a lot of companies will first solve that first mile problem of like, how do I get stuff fast to the internet in general? And they'll use UDP with a desktop client. We chose not to do that. We actually use HTTP, which means just works in the browser like normal, right? And the way that we get around the speed barrier is it's fairly simple now, not a novel approach at this point, but we take the file, and when you drop it into the browser, we break up that single file into thousands and thousands of little blobs, and we do parallel streams. So, that
like
can
a download accelerator. People may be familiar with this. Like back in the early days of the internet, you would have a download accelerator, Chrome extension or something. So instead of downloading from one FTP server, you would download from 10 at the same time, and you would then recompile it.
Exactly.
BitTorrent was a similar protocol. Yeah.
Similar idea. So we take that one file, we do multiple streams up to the server, and then when it gets to the server, it reassembles all those little blobs. But then, the second component is, well, we want to be communicating with a server that's very close to our physical location, so we limit latency. And so that's how you utilize a global CDN. So we're communicating with a server that's near to the user. So if somebody in London is uploading, they're uploading to a server in London. But our home base is not in London. Our home base is in North Virginia. That's where our data origin is. And so now we got to get the data from London to North Virginia, and that's a long stretch. And what we do, and other people, but what we do is we're not going over the standard internet. We're on AWS. We're a company that's on AWS. So we go over the Amazon backbone. We can move it very quickly, so we can do low latency connection for the first mile, and then do UDP based, just blast data on the AWS backbone from London to North Virginia.
And that's probably also very economical, right? Amazon has that as a fixed cost business. They've already run those cables or whatever. So whether they murder you on those costs?
It's pretty expensive. So the reality is our users really, if you look us up on Twitter, people are always commenting like, oh my God, what kind of magic sauce is in Frame.io? How am I uploading so fast? It costs us a lot of money. It does cost us a lot of money. It's a very expensive part. It's probably one of the most expensive parts of our infrastructure, providing this accelerated data transfer service. But it's so worth it, and you need it. You absolutely need it. Of course, over time we've learned how to make it less expensive. We're continuing to do that. It's very important for us to figure out how to keep bringing those costs down. But it is pricey. And has this
ability to be distributed, how has being distributed changed the industry in that, when I was growing up in New York, there were filmmakers in New York, Spike Lee, whoever, NYU film crowd. Darren Aronofsky was doing this like pie thing, and Bennett Miller was doing The Cruise. There was like this like little cadre of editors, but eventually they all had to, where they were all thinking like, I got to go to LA because I'm not going to be relevant, right? And if you were a writer or an editor, to be in New York versus LA, you were basically considering like, well, maybe I'm capping my upside here of what's possible. Has that changed now where like they don't care where video editors are now that there's a pandemic? Work from that would have been in, bays, editing bays in Studio City are now sent around the world, or was that already occurring before this?
It was already starting to occur, but not nearly like it's occurring now. And so right now, location is relatively irrelevant. I'd say there's two parts to that question. The first is that for the people that are like, hey, do I have to be in a major market? Do I have to be in LA? Well, something that's changed is that, like if you want to be in Hollywood, you still have to be in LA. But Hollywood is actually, it's one slice, the world of video and the opportunities to be a storyteller and a creative have just expanded so much, right? Like, yes, Hollywood is still in Hollywood, but majority of the industry, if you look at like our market, our total addressable market, majority of the market is not in LA. Feature film market's in LA, but if you look at total global footprint of people that make video, they're just all over.
And how much of your product is being used by the studios, the TV industry versus, let's say, this emerging YouTube sort of, or that's not emerging anymore. I guess that's kind of established. You have the sort of YouTubers who are making the 3 to, 10-minute videos. And then you have this new phenomenon of, stories and TikTok. Are any of those type of people using your product, or is it just for a 30-second, or 2-minute clip? It's not necessary.
Yeah. So the answer is yes. They are, the threshold for using Frame.io at the low end is people that are kind of earning a living making videos. So the TikTokers are typically not, maybe the very high end ones, just like the YouTubers, high end YouTubers. If you're earning a living, then Frame.io is fair game. We're very accessible. We start at $15 a month. So, very, very accessible. But then we scale all the way up to the Hollywood feature films, major media organizations, broadcast organizations, major brands that have, big internal teams. So it's everyone. When we pitch to investors, one of the questions I get asked every single time, I've gotten asked every single round, and I don't think they've ever felt my answer was sufficient. They say, well, who's Frame.io for? Like, are you for X or are you for Y? Are you going to be an enterprise company, or are you going to be, this consumer company? And I think that, what I've always said is like Frame.io is for anybody that makes video, because actually the fundamental mechanics of what you do when you're making video are actually the same, whether you're doing a YouTube video or a feature film. Obviously there are differences and there are different needs from, security perspective and how we build our business with go-to-market function and, sales and blah, blah, blah. Lots of things differ. But our model has been, we have a retail business, which is self-serve. People can sign up with a credit card. You never have to talk to us. Very easy. That generates a lot of awareness, a lot of word of mouth, and then people kind of spread it into these organizations that then start using it, and our sales team goes in and sells to them. So we've had this great virtuous cycle of having, and I think this is actually more common now for SaaS enterprise, where you have this bottoms up and top down motion, and they're feeding each other, and that's worked very successfully for Frame.io. So we have every major studio has had something go through Frame.io at this point. And we have been able to meet all of those security requirements, but then we still have the individual creator that's doing stuff for the web. That's
got to be like their big pet peeve now, is making sure that the Luke Skywalker cameo at the end of Mandalorian season 2, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, some cameo like that or Ashoka, whatever, doesn't leak, right? And I saw Jon Favreau talking about it, couldn't believe, and Mark Hamill couldn't believe that his cameo at the end of Mandalorian season 2 didn't leak. And I guess that's the issue you're talking about here in terms of security and authentication, that you had to, as a SaaS company, convince these studios that you as Frame.io can't see their videos. All that stuff is either saved on their servers or saved on your servers, but you can't see it, right? You have to, and I'm not saying that Disney's your customer, but in a hypothetical case like that, you've got to clear their hurdle in terms of security, correct?
That's right. And Disney really sets the benchmark for security in the industry. They're sort of the benchmark setter. That's absolutely correct. So, it is all the stuff is on our server, but, there's a process that requires multiple humans for any one human to get access to footage in Frame.io. And, we have to do the standard enterprise security stuff, SOC 2, SOC compliance. We're SOC 2 type 2 compliant. There's something in the media and entertainment industry called TPN, which is like a governing body that manages content security. It's kind of like it used to be MPAA. I'm sure you've all seen that logo. Yeah, sure. It's that sort of evolved into TPN, Trusted Partner Network. And so we've gone through all these programs. We've built some really cool tech. We have a feature called Watermark ID, which is if I sent you a video and you hit play, we would actually do a real-time, on-demand transcode of that asset with all of your personally identifiable information burned in. It would say JSON, location, time, IP address, and that's visually burned into every frame, and it happens in real time. So even if it's a feature film, like 2 hours, you hit play, it's going to start playing back in 2 seconds.
That's amazing. So if Howard Stern wants to watch some film that's coming out, or they give him a screener ahead of time, it's going to say Howard Stern at the bottom of it. He always complains about that. When we get back, and shout out to Vanta doing SOC 2 compliance for folks, vanta.com/twist. One of our sponsors, it's Inside Joke, does, you had to do SOC 2 compliance at some point, I take it, and make sure that you could sell enterprise into it. All right, when we get back, I want to talk about how you did pricing on this product and how you raised money for it. Coming out of a service background, I don't think you were like a developer. You were an artist, right? And a producer. And so that would lower your credibility in the tech field, but raise it in the, obviously in the media space. So I'm curious how you were received by the venture industrial complex and how you cleared market raising money for Frame.io when we get back on This Week in Startups. It can be awkward or even embarrassing to talk about erectile dysfunction. Usually we just brush it off, we blame ourselves, but Roman is here to get the advice you want and the help you need with no shame. With Roman, you can get a free online evaluation and ongoing care for ED, all from the comfort and privacy of your own home. A healthcare professional will work with you to find the best treatment plan, and if medication is appropriate, Roman will ship you real medication with free 2-day shipping. The whole process is very straightforward, simple, and most importantly, discreet. Erectile dysfunction used to be something really tough to talk about, but now there's Roman. And getting started is so simple. You go to getroman.com/twist, getroman.com/twist, and you will get $15 off your first order of ED treatment, a free online visit, and free 2-day shipping. That's right. Go to getroman.com/twist for $15 off your first order of ED treatment, a free online visit, and free 2-day discreet shipping. Let's get back to this amazing episode. All right, welcome back. Emery Wells is with us from Frame.io. How many people working over there now? Ballpark.
We just had, I think, 9 or 10 start this week, so I think we're at 220 or 230.
230 people, and you're all distributed now, I take it.
All distributed, yeah.
Yeah. And you had some fancy office in Soho or something in New York that now is empty and you just pay the rent bill every month?
That's it. Yeah, we're in the financial district. We got about a year ago, we got a beautiful new office, 31st floor, great views,
perfect
lots
time.
of space. Yeah. So
it's got to be brutal to write that check every month.
Yes. If I had to physically write that check every month, it would be brutal. I would puke. I still puke a little bit when I think about it, but it's just
sorry to bring it up.
No, it's okay.
We're all having the same thing. It's like, as a founder, I don't know if you had this experience, like when you get that office and you have that incredible office with the incredible views and you've spent the time making this beautiful nest for everybody to live in, and you've got this incredible vision, and just, you're like, okay, this is going to be worth the money. This is 5% of our spend every year. It's 12% of our spend every year, whatever it is, but it's going to build the culture. And now all these culture nests are just sitting there like empty.
Yeah, it's painful.
So sad.
It's super painful.
Do you go there and like walk around like and just sit there alone like a madman sometimes?
Yeah. I've done it a handful of times. I mean,
it's too depressing.
I live walking distance. I'm like a 7-8 minute walk from the office, which is, by the way, founder hack. Like, do that for yourself. You have the ability to architect.
100%. This is the greatest thing about being the founder, is that you get to put the office within walking distance, and so much so that, like, yeah, being able to go home or change or, whatever it is, go back to the office after you go to dinner or something. It's just incredible, right?
It changes your life. I never had that experience before. And there a little inside joke that like when we moved to, I live in downtown Manhattan. We used to have an office in Flatiron, which was, fine commute. It was, not a long commute, but it's a commute. When we moved into our downtown office,
6th Avenue, zip.
Yeah, super easy. But when we moved into our downtown office, basically me and our VP of finance were kind of the deciders, and we both live down here. So people are like, oh, okay, we get it. Actually, I was very against moving downtown because I thought people wanted to stay central to Flatiron, and I didn't architect it intentionally, but I would never change it now that I have it.
Well, the other thing that's great is, if you're living in Queens or Brooklyn, getting to downtown Manhattan is like, it's the first or second or third stop, right? If you're coming over Manhattan Bridge or you're coming through the tunnel, it's just so simple.
Yeah.
And now Manhattan is cheaper than Brooklyn.
Sometimes, yeah. Changing locations is a bit of an annoying thing. You do like a commute study. You try to understand like what's the impact. How are people going to receive it? I'm sure in San Francisco. I don't live in San Francisco, but I'm sure the same way in San Francisco. Like people make decisions based on their commute. Like it's an important life decision.
It is one of the most. I think it's like one of the great things to come out of this pause that we've had is people are reevaluating the impact of everything, right? And so I don't know if you have kids, but when you have kids, you're like, what is going on at school? Like, what actually am I getting out of that? And then you start realizing when you're homeschooling, like, oh, what percentage of school is learning versus socialization versus babysitting, like depending on the age or childcare. And you kind of, and now you learn that with people commuting. You're like, how much work were people actually doing at the office? How much of it was socialization? Okay, people probably were grinding out 5 solid hours of work, 2 or 3 hours of socialization, meetings, whatever. So maybe they were working 4 or 5 really tight hours a day. They were doing 25 hours of work. Now they're working from home. They can bring that up to 7, 8 hours, and they've saved the commute. So the employee gets 2 more hours and the employer gets 2 more hours. That's my basic math. How do you think about it? And how do you think about now that you've got 24-hour places putting shots in arms? We're taping this in the 13th month of 2020, January 2, 2020.
Right.
In the 16th month of this pandemic, they're doing 24-hour shots now, right? And anybody over 65 can get one now, I think. So we're going to quickly get on the other side of this, God willing, and knock on wood. So how are you thinking about returning, and how are your employees thinking about returning, and what do you do? Like if some people move, like some of your people probably moved up to, Hastings on the Hudson or whatever. Everybody went north, I heard.
Yeah. I think what we let people we told people, hey, do whatever you want. Like you go wherever you want. Don't worry about like needing to be back at a certain time. We're going to give plenty of notice. And if you moved or had to get away, and we're not going to mandate that you're back. We've just sort of been like very flexible. What we didn't do is what some other companies did, which I admire, is they just said, hey, like early on, they're just like, you know what, distributed forever if you want. And we kind of held the optionality to understand how the world was going to change. And like, do we want to return to the office? Do we not? We wanted to hold on to that optionality rather than just saying, because once you say it, you kind of can't claw that back. It's pretty tough to claw back. But we've been very, very open and just, a couple of things have happened. One is we started hiring people wherever. We just stopped caring about where they were. We hired a lot of people that were not in New York City over the past 8-9 months.
How did that change your life as the founder and the velocity of what you're doing as a company? When you remove the geography, vector from hiring?
Yeah, well, it's of course it's enabled hiring. As everyone has experienced, there's talented people all over. It's I don't think it's changed our velocity, our ability to get. I don't think we've had any impact on our ability to be effective as getting stuff done. We've had a lot of focus on just like improving our overall operational effectiveness, and so this year has been, last year was probably one of the most effective, efficient years we've had. How much of that was that due to work from home? Maybe a little bit, but we did a lot of work on operational effectiveness. But I don't think that work from home makes you less effective.
It doesn't make you less effective, and it likely makes you recapture. Do you believe my premise that people were working probably 5 or 6 hours, and then this 4 hours got reclaimed, and you kind of split it 50-50 with the employee? Yeah,
I think so. I think generally, it varies from employee to employee, but yeah, I think so. I think generally that I agree with that math.
What was the culture when you were in the office, and then what happened to the culture, and have you given that thought, and sort of distributed? People are doing these like I don't know, happy hours on Zoom or stuff like that. That seems just crazy dystopian to me. I went to like a 50th birthday party on Zoom, and it was, I literally felt like this was like some crazy Darren Aronofsky film. Like it was like a Requiem for a Dream level dystopian to me. Like
we've done Zoom everything, and
really?
it's a little weird sometimes, but you know, you make it work. We've done a lot of Zoom sort of like social things. We have, like different groups will get together. Our leadership team will get together for like a Zoom wine tasting and things like that, which, you know, it is a little bit weird. The weirdest, I'll tell you the weirdest thing that we did, which I really appreciate the effort. One of the things, I think we have a pretty fun culture. One of the traditions that we started last year that we had so much fun doing, or kind of 2019 that we wanted to carry forward into 2020, is we did a lip sync battle. So we did a lip sync battle at a drag club, and it was so much fun. Everybody just had so much fun. It was hosted by some really brilliant, funny drag queens. And we were like, well, we got to do lip sync battle. We're going to figure out a way to do lip sync battle. So what do? Do you do lip sync battle over Zoom? Well, that would be...
You're talking about Lucky Chang's? Did you do Lucky Chang's when you were in New York?
I don't think it was Lucky Chang's. I'm forgetting the name of the
Diva
venue,
Royale.
Maybe, yeah. We rented out the venue, and I forget it was, but I forget the name of the venue. But okay, well, how do we do
New York's ultimate drag queen showplace palace?
I honestly don't remember the name of the venue. It could have been any of this.
Drag culture, just putting it out there.
Yeah, yep. So what we did is we still had it hosted by some really funny and brilliant drag queens on Zoom. Rather than doing the lip sync battle live, which would have been very weird, people pre-submitted their videos, and we watched them on Zoom together. Look, I'll say the whole thing was like...
So it was a watch party. Yeah.
It was a watch party. The whole thing was a little bit funny. But you know what? Like,
it was something.
It was something, and people liked it. People liked it.
Yeah, I saw Cameo. I had the guy from Cameo on the pod, and he's been doing... You can get a celebrity to be on your company Zoom, and you think about it like, okay, I got 220 employees. We got this X budget a year.
So much easier.
Having like a celebrity come on for $5K or $10K to address the company and goof off with the company is kind of dope when you think about it, right? Like,
it is, and it's so much easier to do. It's so much, you just say, hey, jump on a Zoom from home, and they're like, all right, I don't have to be in New York.
Yeah, $10K for like Jason Sudeikis or somebody to come on and do a Ted Lasso Q&A or something.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
When we get from the final break, I got to cover two things with you. Raising money and really explaining how you went from a service company to a software company, because everybody talks about that and very few people pull it off. You pulled it off. And then pricing when we get back on This Week in Startups. Yes. If you want to build a website or an online store, or you want to do a conference, or maybe you've got some really creative project you want to do, or maybe just a portfolio, there is only one place for you to go. I literally was on the phone with a founder who was like, how do I make something beautiful? And she was like, going to spend $35,000, I kid you not, on a website with modest functionality to some crazy agency. And I said, hold on. Show me the scope of work. She shows me the scope of work. I said, you realize Squarespace is better than this. And Squarespace is literally going to cost you 1% of what they're asking for the next couple of years. Squarespace makes beautiful websites. That's all you need to know. And they have tons of templates that are all responsive. You get to be part of the Squarespace ecosystem, which is constantly improving. You can blog and publish content, that's obvious, promote your business, sell products, and they have all these beautiful templates by world-class designers that work on all devices. They also put a ton of energy into SEO, search engine optimization. Plus, you get the free and secure hosting, 24/7 award-winning customer support, and of course, they added e-commerce. We decided in 2020 to make the best use of the pandemic. We were locked up in our houses, and I looked and I said, there's all these companies not getting funded. We started something called remotedemoday.com. I said to everybody, I want the website up in 24 hours. They had it up in minutes, and then we just had to write the copy. We got it all up online, and it has played a huge part in that. We actually purchased the remotedemoday.com domain right on the site. Go to squarespace.com/twist for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the offer code TWIST, and you'll save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Please use the promo code TWIST so they know that I sent you. Squarespace and the team have been an incredible partner of this program for years. Anthony, great founder. Would love to have him back on the pod, actually. We have to check in. We haven't talked in a long time. So go ahead and use squarespace.com/twist. Thanks again, Squarespace and the team over there for making great software. Welcome back, everybody. Follow Emery Wells on the Twitter, EMERYWELLS. He's the CEO and co-founder of Frame.io. You can go check him out. It's free for individual users, right, on a pricing basis. And then $15 to $25 a seat, depending if you're like a pro or a team member or something like that. Maybe you get a discount if you get, 100 employees on it or something. Or does the price go up if you use 100?
Price goes up. Price goes up, yeah.
Oh, price goes up because you need to check.
There's more features. There's a lot more features, yeah.
Got it. So what's the biggest footprint of a customer? And how do they look at your pricing? And how did you determine all the pricing?
Pricing is such a complex thing. The biggest footprint of a customer is like in the thousands of seats. And so it's, we've had big deployments. So we have a studio, we did a deal with a studio, which I cannot name, but they committed to, doing 150 original pieces of content in our platform. And so that was thousands of seats. And, studios work with a lot of, as the studios are financiers. They're not actually doing the work themselves, but they wanted to centralize and have central governance over everything that they owned. And so it was still like,
right. They work with production companies, right? That's their,
right. Mm-hmm.
They don't own all the video editing bays. In Los Angeles, at least, in New York, actually, all the video editing bays were kind of like a WeWork style, right? You would rent those for your project. You would rent the editors. The editors were all freelance, I believe.
Yeah.
Or they work for production companies.
Yep.
And then the studios would just subcontract out with those production companies, right? Why do they do it that way instead of having like 100 video editors on staff? And are they moving to that as Disney becomes, like Disney has basically become Disney Plus, right? Like that's the company. Yeah. Right. So, and Netflix has always been that way. Are they going to move eventually to having that in-house, or is it just not how the artists like to work? I'm curious.
It's not how the artists like to work. That is a model that you're seeing that's not a model that you see in studios, and nor will we see that model in studios, but you do see that model in a lot of companies that would have previously hired like an agency. So if you're a brand, a lot of brands, right? So like brands, video is the way people want to receive information. So people that were doing marketing that was like maybe 10 years ago was banner ads and email marketing and blah, blah, blah. All these companies need to be able to create video. And they're bringing it in-house, where they previously would have hired somebody, a freelancer, hired an agency, whatever. And that's because, the cost of doing this has come down dramatically. The equipment is so much more accessible. So that's moving in-house. But for the studios, no, they're going to continue that model, which makes sense for them. They're, when you want like the highest, they're constantly working with different groups of creatives, and, those people want freedom. It kind of works better in that model for them.
Yeah. I remember when I was doing this reality TV show, I got like the inside skinny on how this all works. And they're like, yeah, these production companies are getting whatever, $400,000 an episode. And then they're renting themselves back their machines, or, it was all this money was moving around, and people were, getting all different pieces of the budget for, renting. And then they were buying their own Avid machines, renting them to themselves or whatever it was. It was pretty interesting. How did you cross the chasm between being an artist and, having a production company, and then trying to raise money as a software company? Because people try to do that all the time and it doesn't work. It's hard to do.
It is hard to do. So I've had two passions in life. One was to be a filmmaker. And, when I for the sort of 10 years that I did it most professionally, I did post-production and I did visual effects. And post-production and visual effects are like the intersection of creativity and technology. It's very, very technical. And I love that intersection. Like that's where I love to live. And so while I was doing post-production, I always dreamed of having a tech company. I always wanted to build software. And, but there's a couple things I've tried in life and sort of failed at. Like I've tried to learn how to become a developer or an engineer like 6 times, like an earnest effort. I've probably read 20 coding books and I've just never gotten good. It was just like, didn't click, like I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried, and I just never got good.
But you were good at motion graphics and editing video.
Yes. And we did a lot of technical services, motion graphics, visual effects, color grading, finishing, dailies, all kinds of stuff. And it was when I met my co-founder. My co-founder I hired right out of college at my post-production company to do a job that had nothing to do with engineering, but he did have exposure to computer science in school and continued learning just kind of on the side. And he was like showing me stuff he was learning and stuff that he was doing. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'm like, man, like maybe we should do something. We should make an app. Why don't we make an app? And we made a little iPhone app together, and that was our first time like building an app. And we just had so much fun. It was so fun. I designed it. He built it. I've done design my whole life. And after that experience, it was a small app, niche app for our industry. We were like, all right, we got to build something and like make software. We can do this, and I think we're really good at it. And so we thought about a bunch of different ideas, things that we could do, like location-based photo sharing app and being the next Instagram, and all of that. We were working on a lot of those ideas. But, the realization that we came to was all of those companies, and not to take anything away from those founders, those are lottery companies. There's only, you're either Instagram
Consumer is lottery. You're right. Yeah.
It's lottery, right? You're Snap or you're nothing. You're Instagram or you're nothing. There's no like moderate
Everybody
success.
cares or nobody cares.
Everybody cares or nobody cares. And we're like, you know what? We don't want to put ourselves in that lottery. Why don't we do something that we know really, really well, that we can build a business? If we're going to spend the next like X number of years doing something, let's guarantee that we have an outcome. So we said, well, we're gonna build build this solution for this problem we understand deeply. And so we started Frame.io, and we had no connections to Silicon Valley whatsoever. Didn't know anybody. But you said like if you haven't built software before, you don't come from that industry, you don't have a lot of credibility, and that's right. I thought, I'm like, hey, well, I've built like a multi-million-dollar company, like maybe that gives me credibility, and it didn't. So we built the product, and we did a viral launch. There's all kinds of companies that do really good viral launches where they get sort of tons of like organic social spread. Everything from the like, here's the coin and you drop it in the bucket and then you do this and the all that stuff. Yeah. We did a really good viral launch. We spent 3 months working on a viral launch, and we launched it, and it did its thing. It went viral. We had thousands and thousands of tweets. And then I just started getting all this inbound from investors. I was getting inbound from Andreessen and Excel, and I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it.
So from the launch, so if you coordinate a really big launch day, that actually works.
Well, yes, because it was, we were on the front page of Hacker News. We were on early product hunt. We'd had tons of organic impressions on social. And so, that worked. Not only was it the initial base of users, but it got us.
Was there a tool that did that really well?
No, we built it all from scratch. We did it. Wow. We did it all from scratch, and we spent 3 months building this like launch thing. It was first there was like a couple components to the launch. First, it was like an absolutely like dripping gorgeous landing page. Like it was, when you see a page, like I've never seen that on the internet before. Like, oh, that's really cool. We did one of those. Right. We did one of those. And so that was just like very eye catching. And then usually the sign up is drop your email. We'll let you know when it's ready. Right. But we did drop your email, and then it moved to another screen. It's like, all right, we got your email. You're in, but here's all the things you can do to increase your position in line. And we had a little, the gamification and this point, this
invite
many
a
points,
friend,
this many
tweet
points,
it,
invite a friend,
get a point.
do this, blah, blah, blah. Right. So we did all that. And that was like, people still do that, but that was like back then that gamification was kind of more novel, and it really, really worked. So due to that, and this is the critical piece. So all of that worked, but the critical piece was you got an automated email from me. It was timed specifically to be 15 minutes after you signed up. Plain text, no unsubscribe.
So it looked like a real email.
It looked like a real email. It really did. I was like, hey, I noticed you just signed up. Like, whatever. So it was like 2 sentences. Looked like a real email. And from that email, I got thousands and thousands and thousands of responses. And where an investor from Andreessen or Excel or whatever, maybe you guys are just lurking around the internet all the time. You might drop your email in and be like, I want to keep track of this tool.
Sure.
And then 15 minutes later, you get an email from the founder. It's like, hey, why did you sign up? You're like, oh, well, it looks cool. And so I was able to engage with the VCs that way.
Yeah.
So we're really excited.
You developed your pawns. You moved the relationship forward a bit. Yeah.
Exactly. So my first pitch ever was at Andreessen Horowitz to Steven Sinofsky. And so he had Microsoft guy. So president of Windows at Microsoft. He had moved over to Andreessen to be a venture partner. So that was my very, very first pitch in my life was to Steven. And anyway, he loved the pitch, loved the product. Long story short is we did a number of pitches. This was all pre-launch. So we done that launch campaign that I'm talking about. That was like a pre-announcement. You couldn't use the product at that point, right?
Right.
It turns out we were actually a full year away from actually having the product ready. We thought we were like further along. So in that time, in that sort of like year time, I met with a bunch of investors and everybody was like, hey, amazing product. Wow. Like so cool. Come back to us when people are paying you. And nobody wanted to invest. And so we got really close, but ultimately nobody wanted to. You get the typical stuff like, oh, we'd be interested in like participating if there was another lead, blah blah blah. Nobody.
They're looking for somebody else to validate you, the idea, to anoint it.
Yeah.
And by the way, not the other way to anoint it is to talk to a customer. So you don't have customers, the product's not built, but you've basically done this incredible fanfare. So they're aware of you, but they don't want to pull the trigger.
That's right. And by the way, that's not,
fair enough.
Mentioning Andreessen, not a dig on Andreessen, like that's probably the right way to, that's probably correct, right? We're unknown, have never built software before, didn't have any customers, didn't have a launch product. And so, then it took us a full year to actually launch it. And when we did the actual launch, we did another viral campaign and it worked again. We kind of used the same mechanics and it worked again. And then
so you launched twice. That's a little bit greedy. It's a little greedy, but I like it.
It's a little greedy, but actually, I think you should always launch twice, and I can tell you about that. But because you should always do a
Go ahead, tell me.
Well, if you have something big enough that warrants it, you should always do a pre-announcement and an actual announcement because you get double the bang.
Yes,
it takes more work. But like people, like when something's not accessible and it's like this requires something big and good. You don't want to like tease people with something you don't care about. But if you have something big and good, like tease them, do that pre-announcement, and then, I wouldn't say wait a year, but a couple weeks later, then hit them with the full announcement. So anyway, we launched and we had immediate traction. We had really good early traction and we were doing $30,000 a monthly recurring revenue in the first 90 days of launch. So, and that was like these like $15 plans.
Wow.
And then we, re-engaged all the conversations and the conversations were totally different. It was totally different dynamics.
Wow. How so? What would now that you got paying customers, how many paying customers did you have at that point?
It was quite a few. It was the revenue
hundreds
number was
or
like
low thousands.
Yeah, it was like more than in the many hundreds. So it was 30,000 a monthly recurring revenue with these like $15 plans. So
now all of a sudden the entire dialogue changes and they want to know what? Your valuation?
The entire dialogue changes. And there was actually another thing that happened in between, which was prior to actually launching, while we were never able to get an investor to lead, we did get a large company to go very far down the process of trying to acquire us before we launched.
Wow.
We had a $10 million acquisition offer from a wonderful founder. I love this guy. He's such I won't name names, but he was loved getting to know him. It's a big publicly traded company now. And they offered us $10 million when it was just me and my co-founder. Just me and my co-founder, no product. Or just like, or we had a product, but it wasn't launched. So we
I'm
had
guessing this is either Box, Dropbox. Yeah. Okay.
Probably one of those.
Probably could be. I'm just taking a guess.
Just taking a guess.
They've always had aspirations of putting a front end and, being a horizontal platform, for storage, obviously, but they need to go have vertical tools, right? On top of that horizontal.
That's
platform.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we had that acquisition. So we used that to anchor our valuation. We're like, well, listen, X, somebody's going to want to pay us X. So like, we are using that as the anchor for our valuation.
Love it.
So we wound up doing a
Why'd you turn that down? I'm curious. Take me through your thinking.
So we had
You're sitting there with your co-founder. It's just two of you, right?
Just the two of us. So
it's $5 million each.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money for a kid from New York.
It was. We were, actually the intro to this founder was like my second conversation in Silicon Valley. My first was to Steven Sinofsky and he was my second.
Amazing.
And we went to dinner with him in San Francisco, met his whole team. We wound up being at dinner for like 3-4 hours. And then we immediately went back to the office, their headquarters. And like we gave them a demo because I never gave them a like live in-person demo. Anyway, we were doing like the courtship, right? That happens over a long period of time, getting to know each other. And after like this long period of courtship, I told my co-founder, I'm like, God, like when is he's got to pop the question, like when's he going to pop the question? Because we're doing this long courtship. And, and so finally we had a call scheduled, me and the founder of this other company, we had a call scheduled. And I told my co-founder, I was like, all right, there's nothing else we could possibly talk about on this call. He's got to pop the question. He's got to pop the question on this call.
Right.
So
he asked if you want to go to Paris.
Right. So this was like 11 p.m. It was like 11 p.m. my time. It was pretty late. And I told my co-founder, I'm like, before getting on this call, me and my co-founder said like, okay, what's our buy it now button? Like, what is the buy it now price? And I think we said something like 20 million was our buy it now price. And
bold.
And so we get on the call and we do a little song and dance. And eventually he's like, it does pop the questions. Like we would love to do something. And he basically, gives us an offer, and it was a low offer, and it was like, $1 million or something, which honestly for two people and no product, like an unlaunched product, actually a pretty good deal. But that frankly, I think what enabled me to very easily say no is actually already had success with my other company. Like that wasn't going to be life changing for me. And so I had to reach down deep into, muster the courage all the courage I could have. And I responded with, we're worth 50. And that was my response to $1 million, which is like crazy, right? It's like totally nuts. But we didn't want to be acquired. And anyway, we actually wound up getting an offer for 10, which was incredible. But we had this was our first big software project. We had put our hearts and our soul into building this product. And like, we knew we had a path ahead of us to do something cool. Yeah. And we just wanted to do that. We really wanted that opportunity.
So who was the first investor? Who were the first investors in that seed round or Series A?
Excel. So Excel was the first investor, and we used that offer from that other company as an anchor for our valuation. And we did a $2.2 million seed round at I think it was 12.2 post-money valuation. So basically said like, we used, it really just based off that, we're like, hey, we got an offer for 10. That's what we think we're worth. So put in 12.2 million valuation. And it was a pretty swift deal. And then once you're in the club, then you're in the club.
Yeah.
Assuming you do well, right? You got to do well.
Yeah, you've been anointed. You got to anointed.
You're
by
anointed,
Excel.
and now and then we're just on the track.
And Jared Leto participated as well.
Jared Leto participated. Yep. We had a couple celebs, and Jared's interesting. Because he doesn't go through people. Like he just like I talk to him directly myself, and he's a great product person. He's actually really good product thinking, and he's been, I don't talk to him a lot, but he's cool to work with.
He's into it as well. Like he's really into startups and stuff like that. He had Uber shares. He's had a lot of cool investments he's done over the years. And
he's great. He's honestly like, he's pretty gracious too. Like he invited us to like some stuff in Hollywood World. Like he invited us to his Halloween party, and just like, it was cool. Nice guy.
It's really interesting. Like, you would in Hollywood, sometimes you meet somebody and you're just like, I wonder if that person with an Oscar or whatever he's got, or fame or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, he was in Airbnb and Stripe too. So I mean, he hangs with a lot of people in Silicon Valley and is considered like incredibly humble, and he's engaged and he's smart. Like he asks questions and that kind of thing.
Totally. And by the way, I'll say one of the things, like lightning fast email responder, lightning fast. I mean, like I'm like, every time he responds in like 2 minutes, I'm like, I think he must be so busy. He is on it. Like if I'm giving him an update or something, update here, update there. Like, oh, hey, it'd be really cool if you could tweet this. It's just like fire, just right back.
Yeah. Mark Cuban is like that as well. And Mark Cuban is like, does that at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Like just will write you a 2-page. He was an original investor for us when we were doing our blogging company back in the day. And, he would just write a 3. I mean, you would get responsiveness. Yes. But even, like out of the blue, you get a 2 a.m. email. Hey, I was thinking about your business. Here's some ideas. I mean, I think that's why he's really good. I'm a big believer
in the community. I'm a big believer in communication cadence is really important. You set the like how quickly you respond is like what sets the expectation for how quickly somebody responds to you. And so, like even with my executive assistant, like we have a rule, not a rule, but like, if obviously like scheduling is always like constant thing, hard thing. And I always try to ensure that like she'll respond to do scheduling within 5 minutes after an initial email. Like just keeping that cadence really tight and fast really dictates how somebody's going to interact with you.
Yeah. And it shows like how serious you are about business, right? Like if you're a quick responder, you're probably going to build a successful business. You're reacting quickly to important constituents. So where does the business go from here? You get to 200 employees, you've got obviously pretty serious revenue, and now you're sort of probably bumping up and having, instead of venture firms and, Oscar winners calling you, you might be having SPAC people call you, or just people buzzing around. How do you think about the future of the business? Obviously, there's a ton of SaaS companies out there who are buyers, whether it's Salesforce or Twilio or Adobe, who have competitive products, or maybe, are looking at what you're doing and saying, hey, that's interesting. How do you think about the future now? Because you really got to a pretty amazing summit. Are you thinking about this should be independent for a long time to come? Are you thinking about SPACs? Are you thinking about exits, or just putting your head down and what's next?
Those are all really good questions. And in fact, that was the topic of conversation at our last board meeting before the end of the year, because we're at that stage where, you have these different avenues in front of you. And I think that, the dynamics, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer, but the dynamics that, you face that sort of force you to think about that are, as you reach this scale, you think about raising more money, you think about the valuations of those rounds. That sort of sets you on, one path versus another, at least makes you lean towards one way or another. So I think we're facing some of those decisions. We've got to make some decisions about what we want our future to be. And those are kind of active discussions.
It's very hard to know when you have a winning company what to do, because you have more options and it does complicate it, right? You could stay independent, you could be part of something bigger, you can SPAC, or you can just put your head down and keep working, right? And in almost all cases, when you have product market fit like you do, letting your winners ride is the right answer, right? Like, if I'm not giving you advice here. And then there's something incredible that you happen to be a beneficiary of just based on when you came into this, which is, the ability to do secondary transactions didn't exist 10 years ago. Like that was not a thing. And now you can really have founders like yourself go for the gold, because if you wanted to sell some of your shares at a reasonable price to another pre-IPO, late stage investor, that opportunity is there, right? You could even create an SPV yourself for your company and just every 6 months do an orderly secondary sale, and you can pay down your mortgage on your loft in New York or whatever it is. That's 7 minutes from the office. Like that has changed the game, and it's just such an amazing turn of events for founders. I don't like it when it happens at the Series A, like Clubhouse. Famously, I think they took a $2 million off the table each or something. That seemed weird, but obviously worth it to win the deal, I think. Ultimately, we'll see. But yeah, that has changed.
That seems like a lot for an A. Yeah, the secondary stuff came into play for us like in the B and C rounds, and it was very, very small in the B and a little bit meaningful in the C. But yeah, it does. It does, because I don't think most founders do this for the money. I think at least I don't know. I think at least most of the successful ones don't, or at least not their primary motivation. Because I think that
no, it's an after effect of it, right? Like
it's an after effect,
and you have the secondary effect that wealth is created for you and your team.
Yeah, that's right, for the whole team. Yeah, so you want to see some of that win, and I can imagine that if those dynamics did not exist, that it might influence your decision a different way.
It definitely is great. Also, I find for team members to see that happen. Especially for a New York company, where when I was in New York, there weren't a lot of examples of people who got rich off equity, right? It just didn't exist as a thing. But then you started to see it with a certain companies going public, or Tumblr, I guess, was one, or, some of these were able to show, hey, somebody could get rich and could buy a nice house or an apartment or, have a car.
Well, just over the holiday, my co-founder and I were looking at the cap table, and it was really rewarding when we looked at like, okay, how many people have we made millionaires? And that was really cool to see. It was really, I hadn't looked at it in that way, and I was like, oh wow, it's based on it's paper millionaires, but it's still it was very rewarding to see that we've been able to have an impact like that.
It is one of the greatest things ever, because this is why I really believe in these secondary transactions now. When a company gets to product market fit and let's say 10 million or more in revenue, just to do 10% maximum per person or something, 5%, it makes it real for them. Mm-hmm. And it lets them believe the story that equity could be worth something. And I think a lot of times employees at these companies don't believe it unless they're at Uber or late stage or Google or something, and they actually see it happen. Right. But when they see it happen, then it's like,
you get the RSUs. It's real every month. I mean, that's
right. The RSUs at those big companies, restricted stock units, it's very real because they're going into your account every month, and you have to pay taxes and all this kind of stuff. And with secondary, it does make it real. We have taken advantage of a lot of secondary opportunities just to sell 10%, especially for our syndicate investors, so that they can see that this is real, right? So just pairing 10%, 2 or 3 times before your company goes public is the best advice I have to people, because even let's say you wind up selling 10% 3 times, and then the company goes supernova from there. You still got 70% of the benefit of the supernova moment. But you also got the downside protection of the 10, 10, 10, which paid for your apartment or your kid's school or whatever it happened to pay down your credit card debt. And, all right, listen, you've been very generous with your time. Congratulations on just an amazing success, and go for the gold. It's like,
all right. Thanks very much.
When you get to this level, Emery, like, it is so hard to get where you are. You represent 1 in 10,000 people who, started, and incorporated, like, to get to your level. Like,
quick funny ending story, because just this morning we had our first all hands of the year. And, we want to give a rah, like, beginning of the year and just reflection and all that. And I gave the analogy, which I just thought of this morning, but it's a fun analogy for the all hands, which is we're reflecting on, I asked the company, like, what percentage do you think, what do you think the percentage of companies make it to this stage? And we asked people in Zoom, those Zoom chats going, 10%, 1%, 5%, whatever. And then the analogy I made is that, like, startups are a lot like baby sea turtles. You all hatch on this beach, and everyone's excited to make it to the ocean, but
ripped apart by the seagulls.
That's right, ripped apart by so few make it to the ocean. But if you make it to the ocean and you become an adult sea turtle, the adult sea turtles have very few predators, and most of them live long, peaceful lives. And so this year for us, I said we're like right at that. We're like touching the water. We're touching the water, and we're like on almost past the most treacherous, perilous part of this startup journey, and like on our way to being an adult sea turtle.
That's very Suddenly Last Summer for film references. You ever see Suddenly Last Summer?
I did not actually know.
Oh, this is crazy. It's an adaptation of a Tennessee Williams play, but Elizabeth Taylor's in it, and Katharine Hepburn plays her aunt, who wants her to get this crazy new treatment for her hysteria, because women suffered from hysteria in the 50s, and it's called with electric shock therapy, basically. And the screenplay is by Gore Vidal, actually, which is incredible. And I think they were like maybe 2 or 3 years apart in age, Katharine Hepburn and Elizabeth Taylor. But it's the famous scene of Elizabeth Taylor coming out of the ocean in a white one-piece bathing suit that was incredibly risque and crazy at the time. But this was when Freud and a lot of that stuff was sweeping through the public consciousness, and it's sort of about unconscious and memory. It's kind of like Christopher Nolan before Christopher Nolan, like Memento, kind of like trying to figure out memories, and Rashomon, kind of Kurosawa influence maybe. I don't know if Rashomon came before. Suddenly Summer was 59. I don't know what year Rashomon was. Maybe they influenced each other. Anyway, so really good one. Who's your favorite? You said you want to be a filmmaker. Who's your favorite? Who are your top 3 favorite directors?
Well, everyone that wants to be a filmmaker, I think they typically have like something, like there's a moment or film that inspires them to to really want to do it. And I'm 38 years old, and when I was 18 was when Lord of the Rings came out, the first edition, and I love fantasy and I love visual effects, and I love the magic of big cinema. And that was the film series that really, it's been in the generation before me was Star Wars. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings,
Indiana Jones.
There's like a couple that like
Spielberg,
really
Jaws,
inspired generations, and so that was the film that really
Peter
inspired
Jackson.
me. Yeah, it was Peter Jackson, and I watched all 3 of those films. Like probably each of them I've probably seen 100 times. Like insane, because I studied them. I studied every single scene, shot, frame, everything, and that actually is what got me on the path to visual effects, because I spent a lot of years doing visual effects. And I was like, a teenager basically with my crappy camera trying to figure out how to do high-end visual effects and just trying to do basic green screen. And back then it was so hard. Yeah. I was like, how do these feature films get every little strand of hair to be perfectly separated from the background? Yeah. I'm like, it became my mission to figure out how to do that level of green screen. And so I spent years, now it's substantially easier, but
click a button in Zoom and we'll touch you up and put you on a green screen. If you want to see a great film by Peter Jackson, is one that's a sort of a romp of the Muppets called Meet the Feebles. Did you ever see that?
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't.
Oh my God. Meet the Feebles is completely politically incorrect, but it's essentially like, imagine the Muppets if they were like doing drugs, having sex, and going absolutely insane. Like Peter Jackson was out there in terms of like his thing, but I literally just watched
was that an early Peter Jackson?
Yeah, it was way before. It was 1989. Meet the Feebles.
Okay, that was he did some crazy stuff. He did some wacky stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's really interesting to watch. And I just watched the extended edition of The Lord of the Rings with my 4-year-old twin girls, and they loved it. And it's long, and it drags
so
at times, that
it's
extended
like 4
edition.
hours.
4 hours each, yeah. It's like it's 11 hours. What's your favorite?
I had the Blu-ray set,
everything.
And I would watch. I would stay up all night. I mean, I watch it like almost like a couple times a week. I don't even know what was wrong.
I was that way with Blade Runner. Blade Runner was the film for me that I used to. Blade Runner, Gladiator. I think, and Black Hawk Down, The Mission. But I really like that. Prometheus. I like too. I like that whole. I like anything by.
One of the fondest times, Ridley Scott. Yeah, one of the fondest times of my life was when I first moved to New York. I was like 20 years old, and I moved to your like classic like New York story dream, like $500. Didn't know if I could survive. I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I lived across the street from a movie. In fact, I live in Battery Park now, and my first apartment in New York City, strangely enough, was in Battery Park, right next to the Battery Park Cinema movie theater here.
Yeah, they have like a multiplex with a giant escalator that goes up.
Exactly.
Like,
Yep. And I lived
right by the World Trade Center.
I lived right across the street from that. And so I grew up in Florida, and like, in Florida, you have to drive anywhere. So I was right across the street from a movie theater, and I would go almost every night. Yep. I would go almost every night with a notebook and a flashlight, and I would watch movies, and I would just take notes, and it was the cool, and I would go by myself. Yeah. And I just thought I was the coolest person in the world. Like living in New York City, I would go to the movie theater. I'm like, I'm going to be this filmmaker. I'm taking notes with my little flashlight. And that was a really fun time.
We had the Film Forum in New York, and then there was a place called Theater 80 on St. Mark's Place. I don't know if it's still there, but Theater 80 used to do, it's like a little tiny 50-seat theater or something. Or maybe it's, anyway, they would have all the revivals. So they owned copies of all the Kurosawa films or whatever, French New Wave. And in Film Forum every year did their Kurosawa festival, and they would do double features. So they do 2 noirs or 2 samurai or whatever. And we would just go and try to stay awake. We'd see 2 Kurosawa films a night for 4 nights in a row. But the Angelica was the other one where we just
Angelica's still there. They're still around.
Well, the Angelica in New York in like the 90s, when Sundance and Sex, Lies, and Videotape and independent film was peaking, it was like the center of the world. You would go to St. Mark's when you went to Houston and Broadway, and when you went to the Angelica, the scene outside were celebrities, filmmakers, just everybody hanging out in the lobby, and people would be it was like the center of culture in a lot of ways. And now film is not. It's somehow that the feature film is.
TikTok is the center of culture now.
Ugh, it's gross. It's such a waste. Ugh. And like we used to actually go to see these films and then talk about them. Like it was a really important thing to have seen these films as a piece of art and a piece of cultural relevance. And if you didn't see a certain film, you were just, how could you operate in the world if you hadn't seen certain, Paul Thomas Anderson films? I
do think it's still a very important part of our connective social tissue. I mean, like if you're meeting a stranger, you can talk about shows like, oh, do you watch this show? Do you watch that show? And you can instantly connect with people. I think it is still an important part of our social connective tissue.
Yeah. I think I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a filmmaker, Nick Jarecki, and he did Arbitrage, and he's got a new one out now. And I was like, if you made these into 7 hours, all these filmmakers were constantly asking for more time to make their film like 3. I would like to go to 3 hours. And they're like, no, keep it to 90 minutes or whatever. Harvey Weinstein would cut your, 3-hour film down to 80 minutes or 90 minutes. And now they have the ability to do some incredible piece of art like, Queen's Gambit or whatever. I mean, the production value on these things is just, or Mandalorian. Like, Mandalorian is what, a 9-hour Star Wars movie?
Yeah, Mandalorian's really trailblazing some new tech. The fundamental thing that they're doing is they're replacing on-set green screen with virtual sets that enable them to kind of film the virtual set in camera, and it looks great and it's incredible.
Yeah, they use I talked to Jon Favreau about this actually. They use like the Unreal Engine to make like a world.
Yep.
And then it's an actual, I don't know if they're LEDs
interactive.
or OLEDs or whatever.
Yeah. Fully
And so,
interactive. It's pretty incredible.
But they're doing a camera that's filming a screen behind the actors.
That's right. Yeah. So typically there would be a green screen, and then you go into post-production and you replace the green screen. Now it's a live, it's a screen that has the full Unreal Engine or whatever it is they're using, and it's connected to the camera. So if the camera moves, the virtual background moves.
Wow.
And you can explore your shot. It's more like being in the real location, right? You can find your shot. It's pretty incredible.
That's insane when you think about it, what that unlocks. Like literally the same sound stages, they're going to be able to walk on there and do the Ashoka series or the Bad, but whatever, spin outs, Obi-Wan or whatever. And once they make that Unreal Engine, it's almost as if they've created like Call of Duty, and they're just going to different places in the Call of Duty video game and shooting scenes.
That's right. Well, the world of gaming and the world of cinema have long been just like very adjacent. I mean, the technology is all the same. It's just that, like the gaming, real-time gaming engines were just never up to the quality that was necessary for film. And now it's reached that level, So like, I mean, I don't think people realize that the rendering time, like on a per frame, like if you take even like a Pixar film or something, like, it could be like 10, 20 hours per frame with like a giant farm of servers that are rendering. Like that's how much compute power it takes to do like Pixar level rendering. And we're getting now to the stage where for backgrounds, at least, not like tight close-ups, but for backgrounds, you can use a real-time game engine. It's pretty remarkable.
It is unbelievable. And just, people, the quality of people's screens they're watching on, the fidelity of your iPad now is just so crystal clear. It's pretty crazy. It's almost, there's a feature on your TV where you can kind of de-escalate the crispness of it, because sometimes you watch Law and Order or some other old movie and you're like, oh, that's a set. They can kind of blur it down to make it almost like a little more.
Yes, much to filmmakers absolutely despise all these features that are in televisions that they use to like enhance the picture. They're like, we've made our picture look like what we want it to look like. Just show the picture. We don't want all your add-on crap like that you're trying to do to like mess up. They have their 60 hertz mode. They have their like sharpening. They have like all this crap that they add to it. And the filmmakers hate it. They hate it because it messes up the picture. It messes up their intention.
Yeah. I want to go see more films in, 70 millimeter I saw the
well, very few are being done, but there's a bit of a now there's a bit of a push to like high frame rate. People thought we were going to adopt it, like The Hobbit was shot at 60 frames per second, which makes it have that very hyper smooth look, which most filmmakers despise. It's sacrilegious because, for years, that's what video cameras looked like, because video cameras couldn't shoot at 24 frames per second. So like that ethereal look of film, people think must be at 24 frames per second. But now there's people that like 60 frames, and that's a trend going on.
I saw the Hateful Eight in 70 millimeter when they did that special roadshow. Did you see that?
No.
So Quentin Tarantino did this like Hateful Eight 70 millimeter roadshow, and they put an intermission in it, and he went and had to go find like all the old projectors, and he had to find the projection people, and they were breaking and the lights didn't work. And
Quentin, he's a purist. He's there's a handful of purists that just, they're not going to do digital. They're not going to, and he's
my favorite part of it was, in the roadshow, the Hateful Eight roadshow, they gave you a program with all photos from the shoot and everything like that. So you got this like program. And then when you came in, they were playing, I think Nolan did Dunkirk in 70 millimeter as well when he released it. And he got a bunch of advice from Quentin, but not only did they give you this pamphlet, they had the music playing, like the overture playing with like a title card that was kind of interactive or moving. And then they had an intermission for 15 minutes where they also played music. And so you had this like really interesting, like it was almost like going to theater in terms of the anticipation, and they took out the commercials. It was really an amazing experience. Anyway, listen, I could talk to you about film all day. Congratulations on, so you see, that would be a reason, Emery. If you take the company public, then you'll be like 45 years old. Get a little bit of money in the bank, you can go be a filmmaker. You can go back to
I never did. I mean, that's right, because I never did. My initial dream was to make a feature. Everyone starts by wanting to make a feature film. They want to be a director. And I've had an idea in my head for 20 years. Wow. Inspired by Lord of the Rings and fantasy worlds and all of that. And for 20 years, I've been making this film in my head. And so maybe one day, maybe I get to make it.
You know what? I think there is going to be a convergence that happens because I was watching Star Wars Theory did a Vader fan film, and those fan films now are starting to look like video games and using video game engines and stuff like that. And I think the fan films are going to, like in 5 or 10 years, it's completely possible that the fan films will look like The Mandalorian, right? And the fans are making Star Wars content. They're getting there.
Yeah, the game engines change the game for sure. You can do incredible things in these game engines.
All right, listen, I kept you forever. Great job on the company, and we'll continue luck with it. And I'm assuming you're hiring, and you can work from home.
We're hiring. You can work from home. All roles.
There you go. So go to frame.io/careers/jobs, jobs.frame.io, something like that. Frame.io jobs. It's got to be a job board somewhere. All right, Emery, continued success.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.